Well, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Automotive Management Live and the last presentation of the day. It's fair to say that EVs have had a pretty tumultuous few months, or the used prices of EVs have. So I'm delighted today that we have Andy Shields here, Global Business Unit Director of Indicator, to address what's happening in the EV market, where opportunities lie, and what the future holds over the next few months. So with no further ado, Andy, great to have you.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers. Right, good afternoon, good afternoon. Let's get the slides moving forward. Yes, super. Firstly, thank you very much for coming on down. My name's Andy Shields. I'm the Global Business Unit Director for Indicator. We're part of the Autoroller Group. So if you look over there, we have 3 divisions within the Autoroller Group. One is our marketplace division, which operates electronic auctions. One's our solutions division that does bespoke software for big buyers of cars and big vendors of cars. And then the final bit that I'm responsible for, if I just hold on to my microphone, that's good, is the Indicator, which is the business data used car valuation side of the business. The title of my presentation is, why are battery electric vehicle prices falling? But more importantly, when are they going to stop? When is it going to plateau out? And maybe, is it even going to recover at some point? How does Indicator get its data? I'm going to share a lot of information about the UK market. I'm going to share a lot of information about the European market and the pricing that's there. But how do we get that data together? Well, we get that data by analysing vehicle advertisements in every market, every one of the 13 markets that we operate in. And we take out of the internet and analyse from the internet 10 million used car adverts every single day. In the UK, that comes to 650,000 adverts, because we look not just at individual portals, we look at car dealer websites, we look at manufacturer websites, as well as the major portals. It gives us coverage of 98% of the total UK market. But we don't just look at retail prices. Because we're part of an auction company, we have trade prices as well. So as a business, I have 1 million vehicles going through our auction business, and as a result, we can add that 1 million vehicles through our auction business to the 10 million vehicles that we have on the retail side of data and get to really accurate trade pricing as well. But we're not just focused on what's the average price of a car, we look at the desirability of that car. So we look at the amount of stock of that type of vehicle in the market, and we also look at the sales rate of that vehicle. And by looking at the ratio between supply, the amount of cars in stock, and the demand, the number that are being sold, we can really get an understanding of what is an interesting car for a dealer to buy, and therefore what is an interesting car to try and take some profit out of, or maybe what is a not so interesting car that shouldn't be retailed or should be priced low to clear it quickly. Why do we need Indicator? Why do people need Indicator? From a dealer side, we help with all their stock management and profit optimization. We're not just a valuation company. We give information to the branch managers, to the pricing managers for their whole stock to optimize their total used car operation. For OEMs, we provide data. We effectively scan and get information on 140,000 dealers across the whole of Europe. So I can tell a manufacturer exactly how each one of their sites are performing and how their network is performing overall. And then for fleet owners who are selling cars, we give them that same pricing information and market attractiveness scores. So that's what we do, and that's why hopefully people are interested in us. But let's start looking at used car prices initially across Europe, and then I'll go and drill into the UK in more detail. So what I've got here is European stock in dealers of internal combustion engine vehicles for the last 24 months. And what you can see there is overall that stock has been relatively steady. That stock has been relatively stable over the last 24 months, in line with the market demands. But if I look at battery electric vehicle stock across Europe, all of a sudden in October 2020, across the whole of Europe, there was a sudden influx of stock into the dealer networks. And this influx of stock was driven by a number of factors. COVID was one of the elements that went with it, But also it was things like the CAFE regulations of 2020 forced manufacturers to over-register battery electric vehicles and force them into the market. 3 years later, those cars come out and they start impacting the used market. What does that mean? Well, if I look at prices, and they're complicated charts here, but just simplistically, across the whole of Europe, battery electric vehicle prices have been dropping. In Germany, from their peak, they've dropped 27%. In Spain, they've dropped 20%. In Netherlands, just over 20%. And in Denmark, 21%. So across the whole of Europe, this influx of used battery electric vehicles into stock has really impacted pricing. But as we know, the UK has had its own pressures. An island nation means that there's nowhere where the cars can push out into other countries. Sorry, excuse me, as my headset jumps off. So what have we seen in the UK? In the last 12 months, we've seen a 38.3% drop in battery electric vehicle prices. It's been pain and agony for a large number of people. But what's been driving that issue within the UK? Well, here is battery electric vehicle stock in UK dealers. So I showed you the European situation where it rose up and is continuing to rise, maybe a bit of a plateau. If I look at stock of battery electric vehicles in UK dealers, it looks like the problem's over. Stock levels are dropping down. Everything's coming back into balance. No, quite the opposite. What's happened here is the UK dealer network has decided, I don't want to have a battery electric vehicle, and dealer after dealer after dealer has implemented stock bans, stocking bans, purchasing bans. And as a result, battery electric vehicle stock in the UK dealer network has actually been dropping. But that hasn't been a case of there isn't the supply coming through, it's just backed up with the leasing companies, with the rental companies. And that pressure is trying to force its way through, but because dealers aren't stocking, the prices are coming in the wholesale market, the prices are coming down and down and down, and bringing the retail price down as well. If I look at battery electric vehicle market share, you can see the fact that it's grown over the period from virtually nothing to about 16% at the moment. But what's interesting in that is the peaks that you see. And these peaks are then basically being driven by governmental legislation, by CAFE regulations, where manufacturers would have huge penalties if they didn't hit particular CO2 targets. So the market has been a forced market. It's not a natural market from a new car point of view. And that's cascaded into the used car market. But what's more interesting from a new car point of view is the fact that the market in the UK for battery electric vehicles as a share of the total new car market is now beginning to stagnate. There's been a little bit of a peak at the end of the year, as there always is, to hit targets, but overall, it's about 16%, and it hasn't grown. The consumer does not appear to be wanting to take all this extra amount of battery electric vehicles that the manufacturers are pushing onto the market. But they are in some places. And again, this is another part of the pressure that you see coming into the market. So this data is from the BVRLA, and it's showing the share of battery electric vehicles in different fleet segments. The green bit is the one to look at. If you take business contract hire, you have a 42% share of battery electric vehicles. If you take finance lease, you have a 59% share of battery electric vehicles. And in salary sacrifice, yes, it's a small sector, 91% of registrations are battery electric. Why? Because the government puts in benefit in kind taxation benefits to the fleet driver who takes these cars on in swathes. But that's not a natural demand, it's just because they're cheaper from taxation point of view. So if you look at the total fleet market, it's about 49% battery electric vehicle. And I said the overall fleet and retail market is about 16%. What does that mean for the true retail consumer's level of demand, of desire for a battery electric vehicle? It's actually below 10%. So with these swathes of fleet battery electric vehicles coming off and being forced into consumers on the retail market in extremely high levels, it doesn't stack. So basically, fleet drivers are very much wanting to take battery electric vehicles, but the consumer in the UK isn't yet bought into it in the same volumes. So these are the challenges, these are the issues, and these are the things that have been driving the UK, particularly compared to the rest of Europe, down, down, down. So when will it stop? Well, as we've talked about, there's been lots of pressure from various governmental regimes, from CAFE regulations, from benefit in kind. But earlier in this year, Rishi Sunak said, ha, this battery electric thing, it's causing lots of problems for the UK consumer. I'm going to ease the regulations, I'm going to make it better, and the UK consumer is not going to have so much pain and can get cheaper cars, etc. Rishi to the rescue. And we have this thing called the ZEV mandate, and he played around with that. That's all he was doing. So what is the ZEV mandate? Well, the ZEV mandate is the obligation that manufacturers have got to hit certain targets in terms of zero emissions vehicles. This year we're at 16%. Next year they have to hit 22%. And that rate has got to grow all the way to 2030, where they have to hit 80%, and 2035 they have to hit 100%. What happens if they don't hit it? They get hit with a fine. £15,000 for every car that they are below that target. £15,000. It's a huge amount of money. And it's a massive incentive for manufacturers to force the market and over-register. What did Rishi do to the ZEV mandate to make it better for everybody? Well, he took the bit from 2030, where basically every vehicle that wasn't a battery electric vehicle should have some form of electric in it. And he went, well, you can have some internal combustion engines round about 2030, it's okay. Frankly, it was a nothingness. It was amazing that he did it because he got a lot of stick for being non-environmental, but frankly, it had no impact at all for the UK consumer currently, and when it gets to that point, probably very little impact there as well. So basically, Rishi's change isn't going to help us out of the current RV decline that we've got and the current oversupply from battery electric vehicles that we have at the moment. But there's going to be even more disruption coming to the market. The Chinese. Here's a great example. BYD, just launching in the UK at the moment. The BY Dolphin design basically is a competitor of the VW ID3. Now, just to give you a scale of BYD, they sell 900,000 battery electric vehicles a year across the world. Volkswagen sell 500,000. They're almost twice the size of Volkswagen in battery electric vehicles. They're coming to market with a Dolphin. It's a fantastic car. That top spec car is £31,695. It comes with panoramic roof. It comes with a heat exchanger for the batteries. Up against the ID3 that doesn't have a heat exchanger, doesn't have a panoramic roof, and is £37,000. And lease rates are significantly cheaper as well because they're all being subvented on top. This is the pressure that's now going to start building over and above all the legislation. A whole swathe of Chinese manufacturers, all focused on battery electric vehicles, all pushing their way into the market, all undercutting the existing players. So if you bought an ID3 thinking the residual values of that were going to hold up when you bought it 3 years ago, don't see why, when you've got the new car coming in of the BYD at such an affordable price. It's going to make it harder and harder and harder. So going back to my chart showing how battery electric vehicle prices have dropped down, the question you've got to say is, so when's it going to stop? When is the pain going to go away for the UK dealer network who are taking hits after hit after hit in their stock valuations? Is there a backstop? Is there a point where the market evens out? Well, We think there possibly is. So here's some analysis. What you have here is Peugeot 208. We've got the Peugeot 208 and Peugeot 2008, petrol. And what we're looking at is the residual value of a 2-year-old Peugeot 208 over the last 24 months. And from that point, 12 months, relatively stable. If we then look at the battery electric vehicle equivalent and what price that has been coming in with, then we see this trend, the decline, the pain that I showed you before. But interestingly, a plateau point. Interestingly, a point where all of a sudden, you could argue that the battery electric vehicle has dropped so much in price as a used vehicle, it's a really interesting car to the consumer. Okay, but that's just one example, or two examples. Do we see that elsewhere? Well, here we have Citroën C4 diesel and C4 petrol, and then you see the battery electric vehicle equivalent to that. Price comes down and plateaus. And frankly, we're seeing that across a number of vehicles. Whilst the total market is still going down, what we're seeing is at the point that the battery electric vehicle equals or just goes below the price of the equivalent, then that's where it plateaus out. Why is that? Clever salesman. I have 2 cars in my showroom or in my forecourt, 1 petrol, 1 battery electric. Customer comes in. It's easier to sell the battery electric vehicle because now it's cheaper than the petrol equivalent of it. So from that point of view, we are seeing this plateau point coming in on every car when it goes below the battery, the internal combustion engine pricing. There's still a number of cars that have got to drop to that level. So it's not happening everywhere, but over the next few months, what we expect to see is battery electric vehicle prices no longer crash down in the way that they have been, but start pegging themselves to the price of internal combustion engine vehicles. So the question then is, where does the market go next? How stable is the internal combustion engine market? Because if that starts dropping, guess what? It's going to take the battery electric vehicles down with it as well. And that's maybe the next question to ask. But at this stage, is the end really nigh? I'm happy to answer some questions and go through that. Thank you for listening.
Perfect, thank you. Andy, thank you very, very much. It's fascinating to see these insights. We've got an opportunity to ask some questions. So there's a roving microphone. If anyone's got a question, please put your hand up. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm John Kelly. I'll tell you what it is. There's infrastructure for charging points.
Can you hold your microphone just a bit closer so we can all hear?
Infrastructure for charging points is for lack of people, clients not wanting to buy electric cars.
Sorry?
The infrastructure for charging points.
Yeah, it's really fascinating in terms of...
Because if you want to do a long journey,
yeah,
you're not going to muck about your electric car. You're going to go for a petrol hybrid or a diesel hybrid or a petrol car or a diesel car to complete that journey.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really good point. So I think the interesting thing, again, if we look across Europe in terms of, and then use that as a precursor for the UK, we've seen that across a lot of European countries, even they have been in a position where the number of charging points hasn't reflected the number of vehicles. And that is definitely a pressure. The question is, why is the UK consumer feeling negative about it? The first one is range anxiety. The second one is, can I find a charging point? The third one is things like, when the Luton fire happened, you had the Luton fire, lots of cars went up. There was a video on the internet that was the end is nigh for battery electric vehicles. They go up in flames. Actually, it wasn't even a battery electric vehicle that caught fire. It was a diesel. But the negative press that is out there on battery electric vehicles is one of the contributing factors behind the consumer not wanting to buy them at a price that is above internal combustion engine. The question is, at what point does the consumer overcome the stresses and issues that they've got? And you're right, if we're going to follow to 100% battery electric vehicles, the government's got to pull its finger out and get charging points, or that will then start a further cascade in terms of pressure. But at the moment, the consumer's buying into it, so long as the car is £2,000 lower, I could be interested in a BEV as opposed to internal. And that's what we're seeing in terms of the stock turn of battery electric vehicles and also the pricing.
So looking at the data you showed, Andy,
Yep.
it looks as though there's at least short-term opportunities to be opportunistic if you're a retailer, if you pick the right cars.
Yeah.
How do you exploit that opportunity? And I suppose second question, or the follow-on, is that just a short-term opportunity, or do you see this as an opportunity for the next 2 to 3 years?
I think there's going to be, one of the things that happens in any volatile market is there's a lot of pain, but for the brave, there's a lot of opportunities. So I'll give the example. Just recently, Onto, which was a major mobility company doing short rental on flexible rental on battery electric vehicles. They went into receivership primarily as a result of residual values crashing the way they have done. What happened? Well, a certain Virtue went in and bought 600 of their cars like that, straight away. Why? They'd done the mathematics. They'd done the numbers. They realized that they could buy those vehicles at the right price, and more importantly, their competitors weren't stocking battery electric vehicles. So where there is demand in the market, what will happen? They will come to those people who've got the cars. And actually the salesman got trained very strongly in terms of how do you sell a battery electric vehicle to a customer. People who've got the mindset, there's not enough charging points, there's insurance is going up, the end of the world, etc. If you can get a well-trained salesman who knows the product, knows what it is, knows the issues, knows how to overcome any objections that are there, and is able to sell the new value case of a battery electric vehicle, which is, okay, if you are driving all the way to Leeds and back every week, maybe it's not the car for you. But if it's your local runaround and you can charge it up in your house at 8 pence per kilowatt hour, well, why wouldn't you do that? And people then start buying in to that value case.
Again, just building on your presentation, it looks as though we've got a highly distorted new car market in the UK. So benefiting kind taxes, pushing fleet down the EV route. You've now got the CAFE moving to the ZEV mandate. That would seem to indicate, if I followed what you were saying, that there's going to be pre-registration and a distorted market on ICE vehicles this year to avoid penalties next year. So should you avoid buying any stock at the moment because the cascade or the cascading impact on residual values is going to continue until at least those pre-registered cars have washed through?
And that's a really good point that you raised. So actually, whilst if you go back to effectively 2020, October 2020, when the prices start dropping, you saw a number of the dealer groups putting buying bans on on battery electric vehicles. You're now seeing a number of dealer groups, I know about 3 or 4 of them at the moment, who've also put buying bans on the internal combustion engine cars because they're really nervous about that. And that's, again, going to cause pressure on overall residual values, and that's why, in a way, we're seeing the fact that the petrol market is beginning to go negative. It's interesting, if you look at the stock turn of the total market on internal combustion engines, it's actually not that bad. The level of pricing drop that we're seeing is not reflective of the lack of demand and turnover of those cars. It's actually getting more into a mindset, and if anything, those of us who kind of lived through the RV crash in the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, where literally everybody's heart and soul went out of stocking cars, and the Chelsea tractors and everything else crashed and crashed and crashed. A lot of that was down to market sentiment as opposed to was market sentiment as much as it was the issues in terms of the economy. And then you saw that point, and I remember it distinctly because I was in the retail trade at the time, going 2018 into 2019. In December, I couldn't sell a car for love nor money of 2018. January 2019, and all of a sudden every car went up £1,000. And the next month they went up £1,000. And the next month they went up £1,000. And that was in the so-called financial crisis, and we saw going up. So they're always in the UK market tends to be a bit of a mindset that says, I'm either going to buy lots of cars or I'm not going to buy any cars at all. And the market flips quite heavily backwards and forwards. And for me, we are seeing that's going to happen as we go into the back end of this year and into next year. Why? Well, one, the market does these things. Two, if you go back, everybody today, and I've been to a couple of presentations, everybody talks about, well, over the market from COVID, from 2020 all the way through 21, 22, the prices in the market rose 30%. Wow, they've all risen 30%. They must come down at some point. I think they will. But actually now people have gotten into they must come down with, oh my God, they are coming down. Oh my God, they are going to crash. Some of the fundamentals behind that actually don't say that they should be crashing as much as they are. But it's the mindset that's out there that risks crashing. The second factor that I think is going to cause distress to the internal combustion market as we go forward goes back to the ZEV mandate. Because what manufacturers have got at the moment is as they go from a market now where they're selling 16% of cars as battery electric vehicles, next year they've got to make that percentage look more like 22%. Well, they're going to make it 22%, or they get huge penalties. There's two ways you can do that. In 2024, you can either push more battery electric vehicles into the market, or actually what you can do is you can pull the cars that are internal combustion engine cars out of 2024 and pre-register them. I know that doesn't happen in the UK market anymore, but they can pre-register them in 2023 and then sell them as already registered cars in the beginning of 2024. And if they do that, then it gives them some help to get there. So what you're going to see as we go through the back end of this year is manufacturers starting to push pre-registrations of internal combustion engine cars. And that's great, but guess what? That's in a market that's already saying, I hate internal combustion engine cars, I'm going to let the prices drop, and then the manufacturer's going to force more and more of those cars into the market at the back end of this year. And that's going to be painful. So in a way, whilst I might say it's the mindset of the dealer network, I don't want to do it. Honest, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Well, I'd just take the advantage to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the competition coming from BYD and the Chinese manufacturers. Do you have a sense of the premium that a consumer might pay for a brand they're familiar with a retail network that's out there compared to the price and specification appeal of a new Chinese brand?
I mean, I think a lot goes down to the product. I mean, Volkswagen is, they bought a lot of battery electric. There's nobody from Volkswagen here. Okay, good. So they bought a lot of products into the market. But as a product itself, it's not inspiring. It's not exciting overall. So question, can that get a premium up against other vehicles? I don't know. But I'll give an example. Xpeng, Xpeng, or whatever they're called. They're not launched here. They've launched in 4 European countries. So they have effectively, it's a Model 3, Model Y type competitor. Now this car comes in, and we all go, Tesla's dropped its pricing down, and they have. But you can get a Xpeng. This car is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. It's got Lamborghini scissor opening doors. It's got every bit of spec on it. The build quality is fantastic. And guess what? They're going to undercut Tesla in terms of their prices. So it's going to be a hell of a premium for a major manufacturer, or a hell of a car for an existing manufacturer to really say, well, my BMW brand, my Mercedes brand, my whatever brand, yeah, it's going to get a premium, but at the moment they're trying to get 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 pound euro premiums against some really beautiful product that's coming through. Then this is not a sustainable level of premium that they're going to get. And so their prices are going to be squeezed down just by the fact that the quality of the product. And I think the thing that you know, we've been through, you know, I show my age. I remember when the Japanese came, and you know, we had the old Datsun Bluebird and whatever, and it was cheap as chips, and it was a pile of shit. Fine. And then the next load of cars that came through were the Koreans, and they were cheap. They were slightly better. They weren't quite what a Datsun Bluebird was, but they were cheap cars. But they weren't that great. What's coming through from China at the moment is really cheap cars, but the product quality, the build quality, the specification is phenomenal. It's in a whole different league. And that's where I think a lot of manufacturers and a lot of people in the market are not realizing quite what's going to come through. I was over a few months ago. We're opening up operations Mexico and in Brazil. And the Chinese are coming into these markets and buying up market share of those markets with some phenomenal product. They didn't do that over the COVID period because they had enough demand for the production they had. But now they've got the production capacity coming on board, and they're coming into the European market. And it's going to be a lot of pain. Okay. And already you see the European Union beginning to turn around and start saying, well, we're going to put trade barriers up, we're going to take away taxation incentives from the Chinese, and we're going to stop all that from happening. What's interesting is, actually, Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, all of which have got Chinese joint ventures, are going, no, don't do that, because we'll have reciprocal action on our joint ventures in China. So they're actually pulling back the governments from European government from making that sort of action, which gives an open door to the Chinese to keep pushing in Europe, but also in the UK market as well. So that pain is going to happen. Good news for consumers, not so good news for car manufacturers.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir. Could we just get a microphone down? Thank you.
Andy, thank you for a great talk, really insightful. Just building on some of the points, because there was a great talk before this as well about the Chinese manufacturers coming to market in the UK.
Yeah.
It seems to me there's a lot of inertia and a lot of uncertainty, but you know, obviously we'll be met with this legislation that will come. But in the build-up to that, I think a lot of the Chinese manufacturers will be met with a brick wall, right?
In what way? What do you think will cause that?
I mean, will there be any sales to be had if there's this, you know, negativity around purchasing of electric cars and you know, this mindset of not enough infrastructure? The other thing is as well is the sort of ongoing maintenance of these vehicles as well. You know, especially used electric vehicles. You know, with batteries malfunctioning, etc. What's the lifespan of these batteries? That kind of thing. And also, as an industry expert, if you can give us some insight into future technologies as well, like hydrogen, fuel cell, etc. You know, some insight into that would be useful.
Okay, lots of questions. Let me break them down.
Sorry, apologise.
That's great. You give me lots to talk about. If I miss a question out, then just shout. So, your first question, I think, was in and around the negativity towards battery electric vehicles, and therefore will the Chinese hit a brick wall? I think the answer to that is yes. The UK consumer is not, as a private individual, is currently not demanding battery electric vehicles in the way that, if you look at the way the ZEV mandate is asking them to absorb those cars. And that's the rub. Because if the consumer was sat there going, do you know what? I want a battery electric vehicle. I desperately want it. And all these cars were selling out quickly and whatever. And then the Chinese came to fill that demand in the market. Then that would be great. Because there wouldn't be then a pressure on the new car market, and there wouldn't be a pressure on the used car market. But it's exactly the point that you raise, the fact that effectively there's the inertia from the UK consumer. Why do I want one of these cars? That then says, well, one, the government's forcing you to have them because of this. The car manufacturers are being forced to drop their internal combustion engine and come to market with battery electric vehicles and force the market and hit registrations. And then on top of that, the Chinese go, and we'll come too, and we'll undercut everybody else. And that's the fundamental of why the battery electric vehicle residual values are going to be under pressure, because the consumer doesn't want them, but everybody wants to sell them. The Chinese want to sell them because they want to sell them, And the Europeans want to sell them because they've got to hit targets. And so the market's going to be overly forced. So that your point is really good in terms of, yeah, the consumer don't want it. The consumer is not bought into that. That was question one. Question two. Sorry, remind me of question two.
The after sales, yeah.
Yeah, the after sales side. And this again is going to be one of the big challenges, particularly for the UK, or for dealers in total. So long time ago, I used to work for a car manufacturer. I've worked previously before this for private equity companies looking at buying dealer groups, etc. I used to work in franchising with a car manufacturer looking to stack things up. And whenever I'd go in and look at a franchise, you'd say, okay, for every new car you'd sell, and I'll show you my age, it used to be 15 hours worth of labour would go into the workshop as a function of that. Actually, when I left that side of the business, I did a piece for a private equity looking to buy a dealer group in the UK 2015, and we were down to about 6 hours worth of labour for every new car. Great. Well, with a battery electric vehicle, it's 1 hour worth of labour. And so you look at the overhead absorption that, if you go to the classic way that a car dealer used to have, I mean, again, go back to my 30 years ago, everybody used to say 100% overhead absorption out of your after-sales department. And then the profit came from the new and the used car side. Now it's 50% absorption, or actually 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was about 50%. It's looking more like 40% absorption, and it's going to drop down to around about 30, 20% absorption. So from making a dealer network stack up, it's going to get harder and harder and harder. That then puts two pressures, and the solution for that is going to come from two routes. Route number one, and you see it already, is the dealers and the dealer groups are going to have to get better and better and better and better at used car, and they are, and they're taking data that we use. It's one of the great things for us, because we can tell a dealer exactly what to price a car at, where to do it, and improve your stock turn and get better profitability out of that. But the other thing that's going to come is, and I saw a presentation in Geneva by there's a think tank, ICDP, I think they're presenting next door about agency. But they had a network planning company come in, and they said, okay, if you take the existing dealer networks for a car manufacturer, and you said, okay, so a network that's, let's say, in the UK with 130 dealers, what does that mean in terms of drive time? What that means in terms of drive time is you've got 92% of people within a 30-minute drive time of the dealer. And they said, right, overhead absorption is going to go, dealer profitability is going to go. What happens if the manufacturer makes a decision to drop their network by half, so that then more volume goes through the dealer network, and more after-sales activity can go through that dealer? And they did the exercise, and they mapped it all out, and all rinky-dinky sort of stuff. And what did they get to? They got to 86% of the network of UK population would be within a 30-minute drive of a dealer. Or in other words, car manufacturers can halve their dealer networks, and theoretically on that metric, not have a huge impact in the consumer experience of where they buy, how close it is to buy their car. But oh my God, that's a lot of dealers, franchise dealers, lost from the network that might happen over the future. Now, I'm not saying it will do, and that's why manufacturers are going down the agency approach and all things like that. But again, from that point of view, in terms of battery electric vehicles coming in, it's not just the residual values and whatever. The cascading impact on dealer profitability, and therefore on manufacturer network focus, and how they're going to construct their networks and how they're going to construct their distribution, is going to change quite radically. And frankly, for me, this agency thing is just the start of it. It's not the end of it. And that's, again, an interesting thing to go through, coupled with the Chinese all coming in and saying, I don't need dealers anyway. Who wants a franchise dealer? I'll sell it myself, a la Mr. Musk. So again, so that was the second question. I think there was a third question in there, but hopefully I've answered that. Have we got the microphone? So just 2 seconds, just so people can hear you, because
I can repeat it. It was about
Future
fuel
technologies,
cells,
yeah,
and yes.
fuel cell, hydrogen, etc.
That's a really good question, and different manufacturers are backing different technologies. Toyota is probably the one that's the most open to different technologies. BMW is also backing two horses, whereas some are just, if you take the Chinese, they got the instruction from the Chinese government, you will go BEV. And a lot of other manufacturers, European manufacturers, we will go BEV. There is this having a look at hydrogen. The challenge with hydrogen as a fuel source is, and if you take it, well, why do you get better MPG out of a diesel car compared to a petrol car? Well, it's thicker, it's heavier, it's more viscous, or in other words, it's got a lot more hydrocarbons per litre in it overall. And that's why, fundamentally, you get better MPG, because there's more energy per litre than in petrol. Well, actually, if you go to the furthest end, where you kick out hydrocarbons and you just have the hydrogen, even if you compress it down, the energy density within hydrogen is actually quite low. And therefore, you actually end up with the same challenges in terms of trying to get the range out of a hydrogen vehicle as people are currently doing out of a battery electric vehicle. The other side to that is then, okay, so what does it take? You know, people are sat here going, the infrastructure of battery electric, well, actually, an electric charging point is a bit of wire, big transformer, plug it in, and a car park. Fantastic. To get a hydrogen station, what have you got to do? You've got to dig the whole damn thing up, put high-pressure tanks in there, lots of issues, and it costs a bloody fortune. So, again, my viewpoint is both from the technology and energy density side and the cost of setting an infrastructure to be able to service hydrogen vehicles relative to reality is if you go to a battery electric vehicle that can give you 700 miles range and will charge in 10 minutes, do you know what you're going to do? You're not going to touch hydrogen, you're going to go BEV. And if you then go forward in technology today, we go backwards and say, where were we when the first Nissan Leaf came in and it could do 80 miles if you were lucky, to where things are today? Yeah, so the technology is going to move forward and the charging points are going to come because there will be demand for them and people will be having solar panels and all that sort of good stuff. So for me, personal view, and believe me, I've sat with a number of car manufacturers who will tell me I'm barking mad and their hydrogen strategy is the best one, but honest, I don't believe it. I don't buy into it. There's not enough of the economics and infrastructure ability that I think is going to make that work. But hey, everybody's got there's two sorts of forecast, lucky and wrong. I hope to be lucky.
Well, on that point, Andy, I think it's an ideal occasion just to say thank you very much to Andy Shields from Indicator. It's been fascinating hearing your insights and amazing data too. So lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, Andy.